You are making the world a better place by listening to the Joy of Living podcast. This is your guide to achieving a more purposeful, powerful, and positive life. Join Barry Shore in unlocking the best version of you and becoming happier, healthier, and wealthier. And now, here's your ambassador of joy, Barry Shore.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. If you're good-looking, because you're always looking for and finding the good, and you have found good in abundance because you've chosen consciously and conscientiously to tune into the Joy of Living with your humble host, Barry Shore, known as the Ambassador of Joy. Notice I didn't say the Ambassador of Joy. It's the Ambassador of Joy. And you tuned in for one reason and one reason only. It's the best reason in the whole world, because you care the most, the entire world, about you, Y-O-U. And that's great, by the way, because when you become the best you make the world a better place. You build more bridges of harmony, create more joy, happiness, peace, and love in the world. And right now you are being joined by approximately 507,000 people around the world. And by the time we bring on our amazing guest, Richard Horowitz, who I'm honored and humbled to say is going to be his second time here, and it's just the amount of interest in what Richard has done is just wonderful, because it shows that people really do care and they want to know more. So again, remember, we discussed the three fundamentals of life on this show. And the three fundamentals are, number one, your life has purpose. When you lead a purpose-driven life, number two happens. There's a good number two. You go MAD. MAD is a wonderful acronym that stands for make a difference. And the third fundamental is to unlock the power and the secrets of everyday words and terms. Simple example. Right now, this show is being carried over the internet. If you ask anybody, what does www stand for? They'll tell you it has to do with the internet. Factually speaking, they're correct. However, in our world of the positive, purposeful, power, and pleasant, www stands for what a wonderful world. And what is the word, right? WHETA. And of course, a big tip of the hat and a thank you to Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, for enabling his wonderful song, What a Wonderful World, to go viral, not just touch tens of millions or hundreds of millions, but billions of people around the planet. Wherever you hear the opening bars of What a Wonderful World, what do you do right away? You can't help but to smile. Now, smile is one of the most important words that can be internalized, utilized, and leveraged in your life, because smile stands for seeing miracles in life every day. That's right, seeing miracles in life every day. Now, I am privileged to be able to speak to people over the internet, millions of people, thank God, every month. And in fact, I do a lot of in-person speaking. I spoke recently with a group, 1,127 people, and I'm telling the story about Barry Shore. I'm talking about seeing miracles in life every day. Some people raise their hands and say, hey, Barry Shore, I've been out for hours. I haven't seen any miracles. And I ask them, are you here? Can you hear? Can you stand still? I can't do that. Can you walk? I can barely do that. You have water to drink, you have food, you have a place to sleep, you have family, you have friends. Every single one of those is a miracle. And the proof, simple proof, 1 million people didn't get out of bed this morning. You know why? They died. By definition, if you're watching or listening, it means you didn't. You have an obligation to live life to the full. So let me tell you a quick story. It's about me. Imagine, if you can, I'm standing up in the morning, completely healthy and hearty, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. In the evening, I'm in the hospital, totally, completely paralyzed, my neck down. It's called being a quadriplegic. It was not the result of an automobile accident or a spinal injury. It was a rare disease. It was never heard of the day before. It took over my body and rendered me quadriplegic. I could only communicate by blinking my eyes. I was 144 days in the hospital. I was in a hospital bed in my own home for 2 years. I couldn't move. I was in a wheelchair for 4 years. I had braces on both my legs, my hips, my ankles. That was progress. Thank God today I'm able to be vertical and ambulatory with the help of a 6.5-foot walking one. So I'm a tripod, not a biped. Can't walk up a stair by myself, can't walk up a curb by myself. I help 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. But you hear my voice. Positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant, all because of one word: smile. Seeing miracles in life every day. I got to tell you, my 8-year-old niece comes over to me a few weeks ago and she says, Uncle Barry, can we spell smile S-M-I-E-L? I thought about it. Smile, smile sounds the same. Why not? I asked her how come. She says, because then it would stand for seeing miracles in everyday life. Out of the mouth of an 8-year-old. But what was she doing? She was creating the kind of world that she wants to live in. And create is a fabulous acronym that stands for causing rethinking, enabling all to excel. You're going to do some rethinking today because Richard is going to share with you stories and ideas that will help shift your perspective. Now, I'm going to tell you, a lot of people that I know, when they hear the word shift, they drop the F and shift and the other stuff happens. You want to shift your perspective just a little bit, and then you can internalize, utilize, and leverage the 6 most important words you'll ever learn. And these are choice, not chance, determines your destiny. How you choose to respond in any given situation will determine your path in life and your trajectory. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. People who chose to go on the road of compassion and be of benefit in the world. So before we bring on Richard, I just want to urge everybody to remember, we do use a lot of 4-letter words. I even use the 4-letter FU word. I do it for the fun and for the shock value. Now, of course, the 4-letter words that we use are love, life, hope, play, free, gift, swim. And the 4-letter FU word is fun. Fun, that's right. F-U, capital N, capital N. So after the show, you see your family and friends. I want you to have a twinkling eye, smile on your face. Remember that stands for point your finger and say, F-U, everybody. But remember to add right away, capital N, capital N. So where'd you get that? Say, well, I listen to Barry Shore and the joy of living. You got their attention, and now you can speak to them about these very wonderful, insightful ideas that we learned today. So before we bring on Richard, I just want to urge everybody, use the 2 most powerful words in the English language 3 times a day from now and the rest of your life. You'll be happier, healthier, and wealthier. I guarantee it. These 2 words are thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks stands for to harmonize and nurture kindness. To harmonize and nurture kindness. Kind is a fabulous word, an acronym for keep inspiring noble deeds. I can't think of anybody that inspires noble deeds more than wonderful, fabulous Richard Horowitz. Richard, please say hello to 511,927 people around the world.
Hello again.
What a pleasure. Those of you who are watching will see that Richard is the ultimate Cheshire cat, in his smile and his enthusiasm and such. Those of you who are listening, you'll have to lean in a little bit because he's more soft-spoken than I am. However, that's a good thing. It's great contrast. So first of all, I want to say thank you for coming back again, Richard.
Oh, my pleasure.
And it's truly an honor. And for those of you who didn't yet hear the first installment, I urge you to go and make the time. Did you hear that? I didn't say take the time. I said make the time to listen to what the interview that Richard and I did together, because it is truly breathtaking and it's really deep in the sense that it touches the very essence of what human beings are capable of doing on the positive side. And Richard, in addition to being a dyed-in-the-wool Yaley, I used to call them an Eli, but I don't know if that applies anymore, a Yaley, and serves on the board of the Art Museum and many other things for Yale. And he graduated in 3 years, summa cum laude, but that's another story. Forget that was when he was much younger. He's also a great dad, has 2 kids, and he's a good guy. What he did is dedicated years of his life to writing a very important book. Now, I call the book A Manual for Compassion. How do you like that, Richard?
I like that.
I call it a manual for compassion. I'll tell you, by the way, do not take notes. Don't write anything down, even what I say. Certainly, but Richard, just lean in and experience what's happening here today, because it will really be a benefit to you wherever you live in the world, under whatever circumstances. And the name of this particular book is called In the Garden of the Righteous. And it's about the heroes who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. Now, notice that I said risk their lives. They were not just inconvenienced. They risked their lives. So let's just jump in, Richard. As I said, welcome back. And I won't go into Herbert Hoover this time. we're going to delve right into something in the book, and then I'll put you on the spot and just speak to us about, well, let me ask you a question. I'll put you on the spot with this. What seized you, because you're a businessman as well as an author and such, what seized you to think of, research, and write this book?
Yeah, it was organic. You're asking me the origin story, right? To use a movie analogy. I mean, I think it was a couple different things. So it started actually when I was at Yale, and the museum had opened in Washington, the Holocaust Museum, and my family actually had, we were very fortunate, and we were been in the United States a long time. So I don't actually have any close relatives that died during the Holocaust, but we went down to visit it when it first opened, and I was probably about 19, and I went through the exhibit, which is really, really tough. And as I've spoken about the book with audiences all over the country, non-Jewish audiences, everyone seems to have the same recollection, which I did at the time, which is this pile of shoes that is there, which is from the victims of the camps. And if you look closely, you see some of the shoes are children's sizes, and it's a very, very upsetting thing. At the end of the exhibit, and my understanding is they're actually going to be changing the exhibit for the first time since then to center this part of it, but in a sort of a corner at the time was a little exhibit on rescue. And there was a picture of a young guy, a student who was a medical student at the Pipe. And his name was Alexander Schmorell, and he was part of a group called the White Rose, who were resistance. So they tried to basically foment a student uprising in Germany under Hitler. They were one of the first people to actually publicize the Holocaust, and the White Rose was the pen name they used. They circulated leaflets all over Germany. They got as far as Austria. Mostly, they started at the University of Munich, and then throughout Germany and Austria. And they were young people. The ringleader of it was a guy named Hans Scholl. His sister Sophie Scholl was a college student. I think there are more schools named after the Scholls in Germany right now than anybody else, but they're pretty unknown outside of Germany. And I found the story extraordinarily beautiful. It was very heartbreaking because what happened is that, after about a year of driving Hitler and the Nazis crazy with these very erudite pamphlets that said, basically, this isn't the Germany we believe in, and this is, terrible what's happening to the Jews and to other people and totalitarianism. They were one day distributing the leaflets in the University of Munich, and there were a bunch of extra leaflets, and Sophie was at the top of the staircase, and the bell rang between classes, and she threw the extra leaflets down the atrium. And the maintenance man, as this kind of thing happened all the time, there was an ardent Nazi. He locked the door. He called the Gestapo. They arrested them. And within minutes, they were basically taken off to prison. And within days, they were executed. And during the trial, which stuck with me, Sophie Scholl said something like, everybody in Germany thinks the way we do. They're just afraid to say it, which, of course, is not the case. And in fact, Hitler had a secretary who was about the same age as Sophie Scholl, exactly the same age. And after the war, she saw a monument to Sophie Scholl, saw they were the same age. And she said, I actually had no excuse for what I did. So, but to me, they were these extraordinarily powerful symbols of, altruism and idealism and kindness. And they really did believe that most of their fellow citizens were against what was going on. And so a story stayed with me. And then on the 75th anniversary of their execution, I wrote an article for the New York Times, which was sort of a history piece. And I just told this similar story that I just told to your audience, and it went completely viral. It went to one of the top stories of the day. It was shared widely, like hundreds of thousands of times. And what was amazing to me, and this has been the case for every rescue piece I've done, there was not one single comment that was anti-Semitic or Nazi related. It was all positive. It was all about, what they were trying to do. It was at the time of the Parkland shooting. So a lot of people were talking about, young people making a difference. And I felt that there was like a very positive message from this, that people wanted to think that they would have done something similar. So I started writing up similar stories. I wrote up a few in another one in the New York Times about Aristides de Sousa Mendez. I had a piece in the LA Times about Mohammed V, the king of Morocco, who saved his Jews. It went to #2 on Reddit, which is very, very widely read. It was the only article that was more popular that day was a girl taking a cardboard cutout of Danny DeVito to the prom. So he and Muhammad V became the memes of the day. And I wrote up about 7 of these articles, and every time I had this unbelievable reaction in a positive way from people. So I decided to turn them into a book, and also to kind of understand a little bit more about why people did this, because it's a very understudied, underappreciated, underfocused on area. And I think, as not to diminish at all, I mean, most of the scholarship, as it should be, on the Holocaust is very dark, but this is a moment where, you can look for not only something positive, but also something that we can learn from that's relevant for today. And as we're starting to see, again, rising anti-Semitism, rising bigotry, anger, political polarization, how can we stop this? How can we create a better world? And how can we also just create a group of better people? So that was the origin of the book, and it kind of organically grew out of the fact that I think there is again, these are some of the greatest stories of heroism in the history of mankind, and they're all almost entirely unknown.
So to paraphrase, this is the greatest stories never told. Well, now they are. And for me, of interest is the year you published it, which was 2023. And I think it was towards the beginning of 2023. And 2023 is a watershed year now for understanding the Jewish situation in the world. Because on October 7th of 2023, everything seemed to go opposite. In other words, if there had been this outpouring of feeling of, well, the Holocaust was something that should never have happened, God willing, will never happen again. And if I was there, if I was tested, I would hope I would be amongst those who would be compassionate enough, not just to be inconvenienced, I might even risk my life. Well, it seems that there's a shift in perspective, and an inordinate number of young people on some of the most famous college campuses in the United States of America and throughout the world are now advocating, I'm going to be blunt, the destruction of Israel and the killing of Jews. It seems to me almost as if your book was the foreshadowing of what could happen in a great world. And now the book is saying, hello, everybody, wake up. We have a problem. Is that fair to say?
Yes. I mean, I think it's been very, I've had the experience. Again, I speak to both Jewish and non-Jewish audiences. I think with Jewish audience, there's something healing about the book, because to hear stories of people who risked and in some cases gave their lives for Jews. And I think it's very important to recognize those people. From the beginning in Israel, the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial, has had its mission to, one of its missions is to recognize people who were what they call the righteous among the nations. And it can be small things too. It's interesting. You had your introduction with Louis Armstrong, who actually was a Philo-Semite. He was, had a lot of support as a child from a Jewish family. He never forgot it. He wore a Star of David, and he was actually a very good bridge between communities. And I think there are a lot of people out there, they get drowned out by the extreme right and as you point out right now, the extreme left. I mean, I've asked a lot about campuses, and I do think that there's fundamentally just a huge amount of ignorance, and it's been a long-term build. And I don't even think a lot of the people there know what they're saying. It's a lot of this, critical theory that comes out of, people like Frantz Fanon, and where they say, the Marxists say it's not that you just overthrow the bourgeoisie, you must kill them. You don't just overthrow the colonizer. There must be a bloodletting, which of course is very anathema to any kind of altruistic or kind world or any kind of notion of human rights. And of course, it's very Orwellian in the sense of saying to the not, and I think there's an element of people are taking this kind of very odd moral superiority to take the very verbiage. I mean, the word genocide was created by Raphael Lemkin to describe the Holocaust, because it was an intentional destruction of a people. I mean, I studied in law school with my professor was the lead prosecutor at Nuremberg, and we learned what genocide was. And it is not what's going on in Gaza. Gaza is a tragedy, but it's not a genocide. And obviously,
right here, because people on the edge of the seat, because this is so au courant, and everybody, And again, I don't want people taking notes. We have sponsors that love us. We wouldn't have them on if we didn't think they're worthy of your time and attention. There's more Richard, insightful Richard on the other side of this message. Don't go away.
Hello, skincare connoisseurs. If you think you have tried everything in skincare, you are going to love what I am about to tell you. I'm pharmacist Benjamin I. Fuchs. I'm a dermatology pharmacist. And what I've discovered in my compounding pharmacy after decades of working with patients with skin traumas and skin diseases is the missing link in skincare is topical essential nutrition. And because of this missing link, we're not maximizing the potential of topical skincare. We're leaving skin beauty and skin health on the table. And that's why I formulated my Truth Treatments. Listen, the skin's an organ. It needs and wants and craves nutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, and plant-derived minerals, and now it can get them in super high concentrations in my Truth Treatments. Originally formulated for dermatologists and their patients, now they're available to you. Check them out today at truthtreatments.com, and I know you are going to love the truth.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Maybe good-looking, so always looking for and finding the good. We found good in abundance. Our cup runneth over with good. His name is Richard Horowitz, H-U-R-O-W-I-T-Z for the world, or Z for us. And this is the second time, and I'm just so honored and happy that he's back. The author of a remarkable, important book that I urge everybody to find time and read it, just bits and pieces. As I said, I call it a manual of compassion. And here we are, Richard. We were just talking about your origin story, and we moved along to what's happening now, which seems to be the inverse relationship of what was happening prior to October 7th, 2023, vis-a-vis specifically to Jews, the state of Israel. And now, as you were so articulate in saying, what has happened is there's this transformation, or this taking over of the Marxist ideology for people who didn't know what a Marxist ideology is even. I mean, everybody's heard of Marx, either Groucho or Karl, but the point is that they know very little about either. And the infestation into what I think are, we'll call them ignorant in the true sense, unaware, young people who love being standard bearers for what they think is good. And as you pointed out so eloquently, I'm just going to put words in your mouth, and I'd like you to speak again, is that what is happening in the Gaza today is a tragedy. It is not genocide. Genocide is something unique and specific, unfortunately, and it happened to Jewish people. So let's use this as our jumping off point and see what is you think, in your opinion at the moment, the inability for people to see, to call for killing of Jews and the destruction of the state of Israel as not absurd and bizarre.
Yes, I mean, I've studied, my degree was actually in ancient history, so I've actually followed the interaction between the Jews and the rest of the world going back to Greek and Roman times. It's a very persistent, kind of hatred that morphs and transforms itself. And right now, I think, the international community's definition of anti-Semitism does include, calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. I mean, again, as we were saying, the use of the word genocide. Again, I studied Greek and Latin. The word "cide" actually means killing. Now they've used it now when in academia to say genocide it could be just like, trying to wipe out the physical, which is terrible, but like literature or something. So it means many things. So when they use the word genocide, they don't actually mean what the average person thinks about, which is actually trying to kill a specific group of people. Like the Nazis tried to kill the Jews, like the Armenians were 80-something% of them were killed by the Turks. There have been 40 genocides since World War II, and I'm very interested in preventing them. Like I actually had I had an amazing experience where I sat for a couple hours with Paul Rusesabagina, who, if you've seen the movie Hotel Rwanda, saved 1,600 people. And that was one of the genocides. He was amazing because he was exactly like one of the people in my book in terms of his profile. But that was a genocide that happened in many people's lifetimes, both of us, and it happened over 6 weeks. 1 million people were killed in Africa.
By the way,
I will
interrupt, because to me, it's when I'll give a human in perspective on something. I have a helper 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. He's from Uganda, Black Ugandan. And so for him, the Rwanda massacres were very real in the sense that they were close by geographically. And what always amazed me is, in addition to the fact that it was 6 weeks and 1 million people were slaughtered, they were slaughtered with machetes.
Yes, and we could have shut it down instantly. And you know, and I mention this because I have a friend in Burundi, actually, who's Rwandan, who went to school in the United States. And I hear this from actually a bunch of people in Africa, where they don't understand why people on campus are so singularly focused on Palestine. We can spend a lot of time on Palestine and why there's refugees there. But it is interesting because, you know, when you look at the world right now, I think most people who really take human rights seriously, and I'm not saying what's going on in Gaza is not, again, a tragedy, but if you said, where is the worst humanitarian, and it's not a competition, but like the worst humanitarian crises right now are in Sudan and Congo. Yet the world is not interested. 500,000 people died in Syria during the civil war in the last 10 years. There's been no outcry. There's 1 million Uyghurs sitting in concentration camps in China. These are Muslims as well. Why is there so there's something unique about, which I think goes to this question of anti-Semitism. There's also this sort of ideology that's been getting some attention about settler colonialism, where it has gone into the mainstream, where I don't think people really understand the origins, but the thinkers around this actually believe, for example, that, you know, the United States, they will point to, besides Israel, countries like Canada, Australia, and the United States as being settler colonial. They focus primarily on the Anglo-speaking world, and they say that the founding of the United States and the settling of North America was itself an original sin that can never be fixed. They don't really explain what should happen otherwise, but they actually believe everyone here is a settler, including the descendants of Africans who were brought here in chains as slaves. So they believe that African Americans who are the descendants of slaves are also settling. And so when they look at Israel, where again, this is a place they might be able to do something about it, they say anybody who was not indigenous there is a settler. Of course, it's even more absurd because there's thousands of years of connection between the Jewish people, but for them, it doesn't fit the narrative. It's very troubling. And again, I do find when you have people on campus coming out the day of October 7th or the next day, so not even before there was even a response from Israel, and saying this is glorious, etc. I don't even spend a lot of time thinking about it because that is so morally bankrupt. But I do, whereas more dangerous is the fact that these ideas get into kind of the media and into the discourse where people don't really, you know, we live in a time also where there's very little focus on history. So it's very hard to have a real understanding of what is going on there other than what is sort of, you know, said to you. Now, I'm also worried, you know, we now have on the right wing people coming out and saying like Winston Churchill was the enemy of in World War II. And, you know, now that they're in power, they're coming out. So we have to, you know, but that's why I try to focus on the positive, which is, you know, these people who really kept their moral compass.
Right. So let me interrupt you and say, you and I are, and God willing, I hope a lot of our audience, we're very literate in the sense that if I say something is Kafkaesque, people at least, if you don't know it, at least you'll Google it. You know, that we do live in a world that Kafka really wrote about, where it's not just upside down, it's inverted and it's upside down. So that when you're right, when someone can even use words to say that Winston Churchill was the warmonger, and have other people shake their heads and say, well, yeah, now, you see, we never knew that before. Now that's the real history. You have a world that is not just built on sand, it's built on quicksand.
Yes.
It sinks a civilization, because you cannot have a civilization unless you can have real civil discourse. Am I correct on that?
I totally agree. I would say it's Kafkaesque, and I would say Orwell would be somebody to Google right now, because if you reread 1984 and the use of language and actually, believe it or not, the two-way screen like we're talking on right now, I mean, it was quite prescient and it's quite terrifying.
So let's go to the book. Again, I urge everybody, we have a worldwide audience, and it may not be that easy for everybody to get the book online, but if you can go to a library, buy it, it's come out in paperback now. And it's just so, it's riveting reading. You don't have to read it in one sitting. First of all, it's a lot of pages, but the point is 11, 12 different stories that are truly touching in the sense that they'll go deep into you, because you can look in yourself and say, who am I? Would I be able to be this way? One of the most famous, of course, I say of course, because people don't know. One of the most famous is about a Japanese envoy. So we're talking about somebody from Japan coming into Europe in a place called Lithuania, of all places, into Kovno. You know, it'd be hard pressed to find. There was no Japanese restaurant for them to go out to eat when they were there in late 39 and 40 and 41 and such. And if you would be so kind, just unpack a little bit, because it would take the rest of the show, about Mr. Sugihara. And to me, it's one of the more touching situations of all the people that you mentioned.
Yes. So, yeah, it's a fascinating story. So Chinwe Sugihara was actually born January 1, 1900. So he was very proud of the fact that he was exactly the same age as the 20th century. And he was born into a Japan that, and I think I mentioned this because why these people, their backgrounds is very important to understand. He was unusual for a Japanese man his age, that he was pretty international. He actually grew up at a time when Japan was modernizing. And so his favorite sport, he ran around as a child wearing a kimono, but his favorite sport was American baseball. So he was kind of a citizen of the world from the beginning. And he was really good with languages, and he was particularly interested in Russian, which was probably the most important language for the Japanese foreign ministry at the time. In a story that may ring true, his father wanted him to be a doctor. And he actually...
Sugihara was really Jewish?
Yeah, and so he sat for the medical exam because his father insisted, and he intentionally failed it. And this led to an entire fight that his mother had to mediate. But in any event, he ended up going to school in Harbin. He was fluent in Russian. He was fluent in about 4 or 5 languages. He was then posted to Harbin as part of the foreign ministry, and he became a Russia hand. And while he was there, he met not only a lot of Chinese. He was very upset about the way they were being treated. He met, it was a place that a lot of Jews had come fleeing Tsarist Russia. And so it was in sort of the north of China and on the border with Russia. So he's met a lot of Russians. He met a lot of Jews there. And he had a double commission, Barry, in the military and in the foreign service. So it's pretty clear he was a spy. And you mentioned that why did they open up a consulate in the late 30s in a place where there were literally no Japanese tourists? Because one of the main roles of a consul general is to issue tourist visas and to make sure, you know, the Japanese traveling there are taken care of. The reason why is he was actually sent there because, again, he was the Russia expert. The Japanese military had a view that and they were right, that the Nazis and the Russians would end up in a war. This was when they still had the peace agreement, the truce agreement. And so he was sent there to basically monitor troop movements. And his son, who was 5 at the time, remembered, like he said, my dad would take us on a picnic and he'd be counting troops and tanks and this kind of thing. So that's why he was actually there. And then during this, there were many Jewish refugees coming from Poland after the outbreak of World War II. And there were rumors of horrible atrocities being committed. And so they came down to Kovno in Lithuania, and that's where his consulate was. And people were going door to door to try to get visas because, Dorothy Thompson said about World War II is a time when a piece of paper made the difference between life and death. And it wasn't just one piece of paper. You actually needed an exit visa. You needed a visa where you were going, and then you needed what was called a transit visa. What he was able to give was a transit visa, which meant if you could get to Japan, you could transit it for 10 days, and then you could go on to anywhere else you wanted to go. As it turned out, there was sort of this other guy named Jan Schwarzendyke, who was a businessman who'd been appointed as the acting consul general of Netherlands. They figured out that in Curacao, which is an island that actually none of these refugees ended up going, you actually didn't technically need a visa because the governor would decide when you got there. So he agreed to write a visa that left out the second part and just said no visa needed for Curacao.
Okay, I want to interrupt just a moment. Again, I don't want you to taking notes. You should listen to this again and write down things. And the island of Curacao, you need to look it up if you're geographically challenged, and most of the world is, because it's off the coast of South America, what we call South America today. And it happened to be a place that Jews had been living in for already almost 100 years, plus minus. So of all the places in the world, and the Netherlands, Holland had conquered, owned Curacao, because again, colonial empire. So it's such an amazing story. Only God could have made this up. If you brought this to a movie studio to make a movie about it, they wouldn't do it. They say this is too far-fetched. So again,
in fact, the Jews had been in Curacao for hundreds of years. It's the oldest synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. But it was kind of coincidental, maybe not coincidental. So people were then getting these Curacao visas, and then they started to line. They were going door to door, and like in a lot of places, everyone slammed the door shut, including the United States of America, for that matter. But people started lining up in front of Sugihara's consulate. His sister-in-law, who was with him, he was there with his wife and 3 small children. Took a picture that's in my book of the refugees at the time, actually literally lined up outside the window, and they sent a small delegation in to basically ask him for help, and he was quite moved by this, and he had sort of a crisis, and he 3 times cabled Tokyo for permission to issue basically humanitarian visas, and he was told no, and he decided to do it anyway. And so I'm making a long story short, but for several weeks he was signing these hundreds of visas, and in fact his Japanese is calligraphic, so his hand was almost like freezing up, and he kept writing and writing and writing. And there were all these stories also about how he was very kind to people. He found a pregnant woman online, took her off. He was just he tried to calm people. There's a person I know, his aunt was a teenager at the time, and she and her sister were sort of like bowing to him, and he said, "Don't worry, I'm just don't worry." He also arranged, it seems, for the Russians to basically allow Jews with these visas to buy tickets on the Trans-Siberian Railroad for life.
I'm going to put, for people who don't know, the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Now, just think about it. Russia is the largest country on earth. There is no place bigger. And let's everybody be honest and understand, Siberia is not a place you go and visit unless you don't have to. And the Russians in the early part of the 1900s built a railroad across Russia because they had one particular minister who saw himself, much like America, as the great manifest destiny. And they wanted to make sure that all of Russia would, and it ended up being this saving grace for thousands of people, and eventually hundreds of thousands of people, because Jews were saved and had families and such, but they were able to transit from this place, let's say Moscow, all the way to a place called Vladivostok, and then hop across to Japan because of the transit visa, and then either get to Shanghai or Korea, wherever they were going to go. But the point is that this thing existed, because otherwise you're going to walk across Russia? No. So everything was conspiring for seeming good, and yet it was in the midst of hell.
And strangely, Sugihara had been involved with the negotiations of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So again, the right guy in the right place at the right time. And it ended up, he then was eventually told, because it was the little diplomatic wonkiness, the Soviets had basically said they had absorbed Lithuania and there was no longer a consulate. So every country was forced to shut down their consulate, and he continued to write visas. Finally, Tokyo said, "You must shut it down." And then he went to the consulate and he told everybody, "I'll be in a hotel for 3 days." And he continued to write visas there. And he wrote them even on the train platform as the train was leaving. And then he threw out the paper with the stamp and said, "You guys just write your own visas if you need to." And so a lot of people got out, thousands. In fact, I regularly meet people who are descendants of Sugihara, survivors. He had sort of like many rescuers, kind of a sadder end. Future. He was at a few other diplomatic postings. He saved some more Jews. At the end of the war, he himself was basically interned by the Soviets because he was a Japanese diplomat. He himself rode on this Trans-Siberian Railroad back to Japan eventually. And when he came back, the foreign ministry fired him for disobeying his orders. And for a while, he went door to door, even selling light bulbs to support his family. He ended up having to move to Russia. He did get himself back on his feet at one point because of his language skills. He was able to work as a translator, but he sort of was, and he was very traumatized. And it wasn't until after he died that he was rehabilitated. He's now a national hero in Japan. He did, after a while, a number of his people he had rescued tracked him down because he lived into the 1980s. And right before he died, he was given the Medal of Righteous Among the Nations by Israel. But he had a very, very sad, he never kind of was able to recover, and he was sort of humiliated and reprimanded for saving all of these people. And, many of the people he saved were religious. Himmler had this plan to destroy Talmudic study and he was afraid it was.
On that high note, yeah. We're going to go to a break. Again, we wouldn't have these sponsors. We don't think you're worthy of your time and attention, but Richard is not going away. I won't let him. So you'll be right back as Priest's Message will be here.
What if you could shop at your favorite local stores, swipe your current credit card and get extra cashback rewards? And what if you could also have donations sent to your favorite cause at no extra cost to you? What if this amazing program was absolutely free and very simple to set up? Well, What If is here. Welcome to Einstein Cares, where your everyday shopping gives you and your favorite cause extra money. It's fast, it's easy, and effortless.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Good-looking. So I was looking for and finding the good. We found good. We found good in abundance. These are stories about real people in the midst of the most trying situations in the history of the world. And Richard just left us with an insight about what Hitler, may his name be blotted out eventually, wanted to do. And I just have it right here at my fingertips, Richard. Page 145 in The Garden of the Righteous. I was going to say it anyway, but you gave the segue. We were talking about something, and it's about the person who was working with Sugihara, Mr. Zwoordendijk, from Holland, who he was a very smart man. He understood something, and he quoted, as you write in the book, Heinrich Himmler, also the epitome of evil, was so concerned about what they called a renaissance of Jewish learning in the United States. They had specifically targeted Polish Talmudic scholars for elimination because they understood that the genius of the Jewish people was not just that they were physically alive and that they could maintain themselves. It was not just the ancient tradition, it was the genius of what was given, we say, the religious Jews, at Sinai, that is the essence of the DNA of the Jew. And everything they said was correct, because Talmudic scholarship in the United States today is flourishing beyond anybody's ability to explain it. If you were writing a book, they say, no, it can't be true. Because 75 years ago, there was hardly any, there may be 10 scholars. And today there are places where there are thousands. And it's the Talmudic scholarship on every level in Israel and America and throughout the world that not only maintains Jews, but keeps Jewish life vibrant. So the Nazis were right. They understood. They were that evil. However, this man, this Mr. Zwoordendijk, was, I need to quote something from the book, and I don't want you to finish and speak. When they asked him about, they finally tracked him down and found out after many years after the war, and one of his sons said he did not wish to appear to be looking for praise or glory, because he was not. He didn't want to be honored for simply being decent any more than he would have accepted a reward for being honest. So I'm going to embarrass you, Richard. Your writing is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It's so powerful. It's so needed. Being rewarded for being honest, hello. It's just, and yet in today's world, we are facing, as you brought out so eloquently, and it hurts, I think, when you said it. You studied with the judge who was the head of the tribunal of the Nuremberg trials. An amazing being, right? I've only read about him. You met him. You learned with him. You won't find his like today. Am I correct on that?
Well, yes and no. I think
it was a loaded question. I shouldn't.
No, the reason I say that is I do think there's a real problem in our culture. And one of the things I often think about is like who you value as a culture is very important. And the fact that we do not value people like the rescuers, or we do not value people who, you know, want to do public service for like the right reasons, or we just don't value people who are kind to other people. It's not, you know, if you look at who, you know, I always, again, think of the Roman Empire when the actors and the, not that, I mean, that's fun and everyone always has celebrities, but when you look at the values of the people who are at the top of the political system right now, globally, it's a problem. However, I do think that we still do have people like Paul Rusesabagina, or even on October 7th, when you read about some of the Bedouins and some of the Druze who've been honored already by Israel. Like there are still people out there, even in those extreme circumstances that exist. So I think like it, you know, the two areas that we need to do better on, I think, is like when I looked at what made people do this, a lot of it has to do with education and early childhood and your family and how you're treated as a child, how schools look at groups. And then, you know, again, who we value. And it's not just who we value financially, but like who we value as a society, who we choose to celebrate, who we choose to emulate. So when you talk about like Telford Taylor, who you mentioned, like, yeah, I mean, this was a person who grew up at a time where if you could go, you know, he fought for human rights all over the world. And if you went to, you know, volunteer to go be the, you know, a prosecutor at Nuremberg and the whole, like, you know, those were like giants of the time, and it was both sides of the aisle. I mean, you had someone like Dean Acheson was around at the same time as you had. We talked about the last time about Herbert Hoover, and like, you know, we don't have that anymore. We don't value, you know.
This is critical. You just said both sides of the aisle. There is an aisle today that is more like a wall than an aisle, and I don't see, okay, it's too easy to point and say, I don't see bridges being built. However, you know, this is America. So I don't give up on America. And we do have some really good people that want to do good things. And the reason I was thinking about the judge is that I don't know if he'd be allowed to speak on a campus today.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a real problem, the kind of cancellation of free thought. And it's on both sides, but the left, I think, is a little scarier because it's kind of cloaked in a morality, and it's also, you know, sponsored by institutions that to a lot of us mean something or should mean something in our society. So yes, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a pushback from that. I also think that on the one hand, there's a big wall between the two sides. On the other hand, where both sides have gone now, a lot of the things that used to be sort of, you know, common sort of, you know, beliefs that Americans had, whatever your political persuasion, things like human rights, you know, peace through strength, you know, free movement of free trade, you know, being a nation of immigrants. This is completely gone. And, you know, so a lot of the things that actually had been both bipartisan are now neither party. And that's troubling because when you look at a place like, and I'm not predicting that we're going into a fascist state, but even if you look at Nazi Germany, the Nazis only got, you know, probably about a third of the vote. It was the communists had about a third of the vote. So between the two of them, and it was unclear who was going to take over, but they were both very violent. You know, the third, when the center, broadly speaking, center left, center right, moderate, open, tolerant, kind, positive, became a third of the people, or was beaten, you know, because of the cancellation and because of people are afraid to speak. When they become a minority, that's when the extremes come in, and they just don't play by the same rules or have the same worldview that other people do. I mean, if you look at Lenin, he was ruthless. That's why he, you know, the initial Russian Revolution was what we would all want. It was a, you know, it was going to be a democracy. You know, it was tolerant of minorities. It lasted 6 months.
So only because I'm fascinated, it happened to be by Lenin and Stalin, particularly Lenin, because I think he was as ruthless as Stalin, as you pointed out. So the first group that took over were called the Mensheviks. And interesting enough, the other group was called the Bolsheviks. Well, talk about language. In Russian, as I think you know, Mensheviks means the minority party, and Bolsheviks means majority. But it was the opposite. The Mensheviks were the majority, and they were the sort of, we'll call, want a better term, the good people. You know, they wanted the democracy side, and the Bolsheviks were the one that said, sorry, you know, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, right? That type of idea. And they were capable of great evil, which they did. And Trotsky, who I don't happen to like, you know, he fled. They had to kill him later. But the point is, there was an opportunity, and we don't want to go that route. No, we don't want to be in that situation. And again, your book is it rings so true for all time. I think especially now. You know, you've driven to write it. As I said, you published it, pardon me, in 23, the beginning of 23. Obviously, not having any idea by the end of 23, the world would be shaken up. And I think October 7th made for what's happening in America today. If you didn't have an October 7th and this kind of this angst and this anger in the country, we might not have had the election that in the results that we have today. It's an upheaval. Much like September 1st, 1939 was an upheaval. You know, the world is changing so dramatically, traumatically, and we need to be vigilant. And I'm just happy, Richard, that you're here, you're writing articles, you're speaking, you're doing what you can. And I urge everybody that's listening to thank God. You want to share this with at least 5 people so we can touch millions. This is vital stuff, not just important. This is vital. So I'm sorry to use these words, Richard, but we're coming to a close on our time together. So I have 3 quick questions for you, as I did last time. And if you want to answer the same way, it's up to you. You don't have to. But the first question is, will you come back again?
Of course.
Thank you. Number 2, Richard Horowitz, remarkably gifted, talented, powerful, purposeful, pleasant being. What is your most fervent desire?
Oh, I want to say something like, you know, world peace or
no. Come on.
Which is true, is to be able to spend more, like a lot of time with my kids this summer.
Ooh, that's a very worthy goal, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes. Spending time. You didn't say quality time. Spending time. The most important thing to be able to pass on values is by seeing how other people behave. And the only way to do that is by being together, you know, throwing a Frisbee, spraying them with a water hose, even though they're in their 20s.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, whatever it can be. And of course, the third thing is they give you a hug in front of 517,822 people around the world.
Well, that was the main reason I came back on. So
now you know why I love them. Okay, you remember, HUG stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving. 1, 2, 3. And of course, you're listening to The Joy of Living with humble host Barry Shore, the ambassador of joy. Remember, joy stands a journey of you, because this show is all about you. Yes, Richard's a great guy. It's not about him. Barry Shore, oh, what a fellow. This show is about you. Y-O-U. You becoming the best you possible. When you're the best you make the world a better place. You build more bridges, not walls. Bridges of harmony. Create more joy, happiness, peace, and love in the world. Remember to use the 3 purposes of life. Number 1, life has purpose. Number 2, go mad. You make a difference if you lead a purpose-driven life. Unpack and uncover the power and the secrets of everyday words like smile, seeing miracles in life every day, or WWW, what a wonderful world. And again, a tip of the hat and a big thank you to Satchel Louis Armstrong, a great Philo-Semite. I happen to like the words Philo-Semite because we need to balance out against the other thing, Philo-Semites. There are lots of us in the world. And of course, create the kind of world you want to live in, causing rethinking. Listen to Richard, causing rethinking, enabling all to excel. And internalize, utilize 4-letter words: love, life, hope, play, free, give, swim. And remember to tell the world, F you, capital N, capital N. You do that, and you'll get people's attention. Then you can tell them all the things we talked about. And remember to use the 2 most powerful words in the English language 3 times a day from now and the rest of your life. You'll be happier, healthier, and wealthier. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To harmonize and nurture kindness. And a blessing from Richard and Barry. Go forth. Live exuberantly. Spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Richard, don't go away.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joy of Living podcast. Now that's another step towards your healthier, happier, and wealthier life. Never hesitate to do good in the world, no matter what the situation. Join us for another upbeat discussion next time at barryshore.com. And be sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show to get more conversations like this. And remember to share it with your family and friends too. See you on the next episode.